and just get a few more people joining us and then we'll start. Hi, Tara. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I feel like a school teacher. Welcome to the Latte Lounge. It's a real coffee morning this morning. It's 10 a.m. And I'm delighted today to be talking to Jenny Carson, who is Senior Nutritionist at ethical vitamin company Viridian Nutrition. She recently completed a Master of Research in Public Health, giving her a wide understanding of public health nutrition. Jenny's other focus areas include aging, dealing with stress, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, detox, and mood. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Oh, thanks so much for coming in. Now, obviously, before we talk, we obviously are going to talk about supplements for us midlife women, especially during these sort of perimenopause and menopause years, and also what and why we might need them and how they might be able to help with common symptoms too. But before we kick off, can you just briefly tell everyone who's watching a little bit about Viridian Nutrition?
Yes, of course. So Viridian Nutrition, we're an ethical food supplement company with an organic heart. So the food supplements are based on a philosophy of 3 pillars: purity, ethics, and charity. So with purity, each food supplement is 100% nutrition. We don't use any additives whatsoever. In terms of ethics, an example would be all of our packaging is either completely recyclable or compostable. So we're really caring about planetary health, and that's how the business operates. And then finally, charity. Every jar or balm, food supplement that's sold, a charitable donation is made from that sale. And all of the retailers choose where that charitable donation goes through an annual vote. So in terms of the food supplements that we offer, we have over 200 food supplements, and about 40 to 45% of those food supplements are organic.
Okay, wow. I mean, and that's why, you know, I'm so happy we're partnering with you guys. It sort of aligns with what we do, which is support, inform, and signpost. And a lot of what we do is about supporting our charity partner as well, the Eva Pill. So it's really great to be working with you guys. And, you know, we get so many questions from women about supplements on the Facebook group. And there's a lot of misinformation and confusion about what women should and shouldn't be taking and what they should be getting through their food versus supplements. So to kick off with, just talk to us briefly about, you know, what's actually happening to us midlife women, you know, as we, you know, turn 40 and go through the years of perimenopause, you know, menopause, postmenopause. Talk about how that impacts nutrients that we actually need and what we start to lack or possibly need more of.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So perimenopause and menopause is the gradual cessation of the function of the ovaries. So the ovaries are stopping working. They're not producing the sex hormones to the quantity that they were previously. So in terms of nutrition, what we're looking to do is really support hormone production. So for example, we need some good healthy fats, and we need a small amount of saturated fats for us to make any hormone whatsoever. Now, in terms of estrogen and progesterone, the nutrients, magnesium, zinc, the B vitamins, but B6 especially, and vitamin C are essential for the best possible outcome, the healthiest production of hormones. So sometimes this can be a little bit of a factor why some individuals may have a worse time around the perimenopause and the menopause. Because what can happen is if the body isn't adequately supplied with those nutrients, they may experience a more severe decline in the, you know, in estrogen production and progesterone production.
I mean, yeah. So can we, I mean, I've experienced a lot of that myself, and you do start looking around, or, you know, obviously a lot of women go for blood tests if they're feeling tired and lethargic, which we'll talk about energy in a minute. But can we get all the nutrients that we need from our food during this time?
I would say that's personalised, that's down to each individual. I think the best way forward is to look at diet first and optimise that diet. So making sure that there's healthy fats, that you're getting good, complex carbohydrates. So that's carbohydrates from sources such as potatoes, rice, whole grains, and starchy vegetables and legumes. And then you're adding to that nice, healthy sources of proteins. That's sort of the best place to start. And then considering the nutrients that we've just talked about, we would be looking for a good amount of different coloured vegetables at every meal, including good leafy greens, because that's where you're going to get the magnesium and the zinc from. In terms of the B vitamins, some B vitamins you do only need animal source food, so that may be where individuals that are following, say, vegetarian or vegan style of eating would opt for a food supplement such as a B complex to provide good amounts of B12 and B6. Other good B sources, there's some amazing nutritional yeasts out there. And then whole grains, mushrooms, and legumes are very good sources of B vitamins. And then in terms of vitamin C, there is a wide spectrum of vegetables and fruits that contain vitamin C, but I always focus on those that you would naturally eat in their raw state, because their vitamin C has not been denatured by cooking or processing. So here, this is when we're talking about berries, fruits, but also salad items. So they're naturally foods that you would eat in their raw state, and therefore the vitamin C in there is preserved, and you're getting, a really good intake. And it's coordinating these nutrients so you're getting a decent amount at each eating episode. So once you've sort of optimized your diet in that manner, then what we'd be looking for is what symptoms are you experiencing now? At this point with an optimized diet, what are your symptoms? What is your energy levels like? What is your sleep like? And then with that information, you can either go to a health food store or you can ring a reputable food supplement company and discuss what you've done in a dietary manner, what you're now experiencing, and can they make any recommendations for food supplements to help address, what you've discussed.
Yeah, because I was going to talk a bit with you about the place of supplements and why we might sort of need or want to take them. So I guess what you're saying is once you've optimized your diet and there are still certain things that you're just not feeling right, once you've been to a doctor and you've sort of made sure there's nothing more serious going on, that's when it would be a good time to sort of have a look at supplements and speak to people like you guys about what you recommend. One of the most common, I'm going to go through quite a few, but one of the most common complaints we get from women in our group, and again, I have experienced this, massively, is energy. So a lot of women say that they just always feel tired, lethargic, lacking in energy, and I just wondered sort of why this may be. And what women can do to boost their energy levels. Should everything medically be okay?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of energy, we've spent the last 35, 40 years with good amounts of estrogen in circulation. So what's happening now is because we've got that lowered amount of estrogen in circulation, there's less estrogen to bind to the receptors. And that in itself is quite fatiguing because there's the less availability. Also, estrogen plays a role in thyroid function. So the thyroid controls our metabolism and ultimately our energy levels to a degree. So when there's less estrogen in circulation, there's less of an impact or influence on thyroid function. So thyroid can also become lesser. And then again, that would account for these feelings of lethargy, possibly low mood, but definitely affects energy function. And secondly, because the ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, or if you're in the perimenopausal stage, they're producing less estrogen, that role goes on to the adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands only have a very small capacity to produce estrogen. Now, the adrenal glands, their primary role is in the stress response. So that transition of the production of estrogen from the ovaries to the adrenals, again, accounts for these feelings of fatigue and loss of energy. The whole sort of menopause period, which can go on for, it can start 10 years prior to a diagnosis of menopause, and even for up to sort of 4 years afterwards. It is a transition that is physically quite stressful, and that accounts for the loss of energy. The stress straight away is depletive of energy function. Now, what can we do in terms of combating that energy? That's where things like foods such as soy, sesame, garlic, berries, these are all rich in what are called phytoestrogens. So these are plant-based estrogens. Now, although they're very mild in comparison to human estrogen, what they can do is help buffer that decline in estrogen. So your body has a better chance of getting used to having the lesser amounts of estrogen, and the decline is less severe, it's more buffered and a little bit more plateaued. And then in addition, it's thinking about blood glucose balance. So what foods will give you energy for long periods of times? And that tends to come from things like starchy carbohydrates. So your potatoes, your legumes, your oats, your whole grains, and so on. But also a good combination of healthy fats. Because what these do, they drip feed glucose into the system, so we get a nice sort of balanced energy production. And then when you get down to the micronutrients, the main nutrients involved in energy production are magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin C, and iron. So it can be a really good idea to keep on top of your iron, especially, and that may even mean having regular or fairly regular blood tests to see where you're up to.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about iron. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of women who kind of try everything for a long period of time, like myself, and if things are still not right, they then go to the doctor. A lot of women take HRT and it can help with lots of these symptoms, and a lot of women can't or don't want to. And I think one of the common complaints we get, as well as energy, is that a lot of women have very heavy periods during this transitional stage, and that can be, to do with adenomyosis like I had, or endometriosis, or polyps, or just the sort of periods are coming gradually, to an end over this 10 years periods before menopause. And I know for myself, I started to experience heart palpitations, and what I didn't realize was, having those very heavy periods, I was losing a lot of blood and had become seriously anemic. And so, in terms of things like anemia, because again, we hear a lot of women who complain who've had the same as I've described. Where can they get iron from their diet, and what sort of supplements, and obviously how much should they be taking to hopefully counterbalance this?
Yeah, sure. So iron can come from two different sources. It can be plant-based or it can be animal-based. So the animal bases are richer sources of iron. However, I completely understand that certain individuals may not want to consume animal products. So in terms of plant-based foods that are rich in iron, they're your leafy greens, your sulfite-free dried fruits, and so on. But what's really important about those iron sources is that you also get a good amount of vitamin C. And that's because vitamin C ensures that iron is in the correct form for absorption. Now, it can be quite difficult to get iron purely from plants in itself because the amount of iron that they provide is quite low. So this is when a food supplement may come in useful. Now, when we're looking at anemia, it can be useful also to look at an iron supplement that includes some B12 and also some folates, folic acid. And that's because there are several forms of anemia and they can mask each other. So in terms of iron, generally around about 15 to 20 milligrams daily of a good iron form. So a good iron form would be ferrous bisglycinate. That tends to be non-constipating and well absorbed and well tolerated. So it may be that the food supplement contains the ferrous bisglycinate with some vitamin C and with some B12 and some folic acid. And that would be a really good start to address anemia going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I remember having babies and being given iron supplements, you know, obviously on the NHS, and they were really constipating. I'm really pleased you mentioned that, because often that's what women say, is that they take it, but then they get seriously constipated, and it is an issue. But obviously there are, you know, medical things women must do if they're having heavy bleeding, you know, so obviously go see a gynecologist, because often there's things like the Mirena coil, or ablation, or, you know, all sorts of other things. And another popular supplement everyone talks about, and I'm really curious because it's not something I've tried, is magnesium. So I wanted to ask you, what does it do? A lot of women actually talk about restless leg syndrome, and that they don't sleep very well, and they've tried all these sort of sprays at night. So just talk to me about magnesium, what it does, and the sort of forms you can take it in or use it for.
Yes, absolutely. So magnesium, it has the nickname spark of life, and that's because magnesium is involved in over 300 different body processes. So with that in mind, it can be quite easy to slip into a slight deficit. A slight deficit in magnesium. So now in terms of what it's involved in, when it comes to restless leg syndrome, magnesium plays a role in the relaxation of muscle. So that's the link where some individuals find it very useful for restless leg syndrome. I must admit, I talk a lot about magnesium with clients in terms of sleep. Yeah. Loads about sleep and migraine as well, because that can be another common complaint. Now, in terms of sleep, it plays a role in the preparation for sleep. And there has been studies done, observational studies, that show individuals with suboptimal levels of magnesium have poorer sleep quality and are more likely to be at risk of insomnia. So issues getting to sleep or issues remaining asleep. And then there's also the issue that they may sleep but wake feeling unrefreshed. So magnesium can be a really good nutrient to introduce into your sleep regimen. And generally what I will get people to do is get them to take the magnesium with their evening meal. So we're preloading that magnesium in preparation for the relaxation and the winding down time of the evening, in preparation for going off to sleep and hopefully getting a good night's sleep.
So, I mean, a lot of people talk about, they have these magnesium bath salts and sprays. Does it work being absorbed that way through the skin, or is it only really the supplements and the food?
It's a little bit controversial in terms of whether magnesium can actually, the molecule is very large. That's why you never get a therapeutic amount of magnesium in a multivitamin formula, because magnesium as a molecule is too large. And that's, from my understanding, is one of the issues with sprays, is that the molecule of magnesium is too large to pass through the epidermis and through the skin layers. In terms of the baths, I mean, Epsom salt baths, that's in the form of magnesium sulfate. I think, again, you've got the issue that the molecule is too large, but I think the whole process of being relaxed in a nice warm bath, and that topical application to the skin. I mean, sulfate, which is, you know, is derived from sulfur, is a very, very beneficial nutrient also. So just that whole practice, I think, can be useful.
Yeah, sure.
So
that's right. And let's talk about bone health. Really, really important at our age, because I know that as the estrogen levels reduce, we're at risk of things like osteoporosis, and so we don't want sort of women getting breakages that takes forever to heal. So what can be done? I know there's a lot we can take, things like calcium for bone strength, but in terms of supplements, in terms of bones, and also things like skin and hair and nails, what would you recommend for that?
Okay, yeah. So the whole bone thing around menopause is something that's really interested me in recent years, and I've done a lot of listening to different specialists in the areas. And one of the key takeaways that I've taken from my research in this is it's going to be a little bit different from what you're expecting me to say. But they find the best way to preserve bone is to have a very good phytoestrogen intake and to participate in weight-bearing exercise. So by adding the phytoestrogens, you're encouraging, because estrogen plays such a critical role in a process called resorption, and that's the breakdown and build-up of bone, and that's going on all through life. However, when we get to menopause and the less estrogen in circulation, we still have the same rate of breakdown, but we don't have the same rate of build up. So then that's when the bone density can become at risk of osteoporosis. So it's making sure that you've got a good amount of estrogens in your diet, and also participating in weight-bearing exercise, because we need that mild trauma to the bones, because our bones will stay at a strength that's necessary for us to get through life and have a good quality of life. So if we're just slightly stressing the bones, then the bones are naturally realizing, oh, okay, I need to withstand these activities, and therefore it will help keep the resorption process in circulation. Now, that's not to say that the nutrients involved in bone health aren't important. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I would say that would be your top priority, and then that would be supported with the nutrients magnesium, calcium, vitamin K, ideally in the form of K2, and vitamin D3.
Yeah.
So,
sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
No, no problem. So calcium, we know that makes up a lot of the bone and a lot of tooth structure. But for calcium to be directed into bone and tooth, that's where magnesium, vitamin D and vitamin K come into play. So magnesium allows vitamin D and vitamin K to activate certain enzymes which direct calcium into bone. So it's getting all those sorts of layers that we've talked about in progress to preserve bone health. And then moving on to, you sort of said, it also affects, or people have reported effects with hair, skin and nails.
Yeah.
A little bit similar. However, I would say there's more a role there for vitamin C, because vitamin C is what activates collagen production. So that's especially, people are really interested that in terms of skin health. There's also a really nice molecule, a compound called MSM, methyl sulfonyl methane, which is a sulfur molecule, and MSM is often used in studies to look at soft tissue structure, and there has been a couple of studies done where they've actually measured the depth of lines and wrinkles and how that has changed in response to supplementing with MSM. So again, there's quite a few different nutrients, and I think one of the things in terms of hair, skin and nails is that there are other tissues that are affected by thyroid function. So indirectly, by supporting the thyroid, again, you can support hair health, nail health, and skin health. So with that, you're ensuring you've got enough iron, you've got enough protein at every single meal, and that you've got enough iodine alongside nutrients such as zinc, the B vitamins, and some vitamin A. Now, you can also get vitamin A from orange and red coloured plants and vegetables.
I mean, there's a lot of talk actually about collagen supplements. I think a lot of women are trying to try all that, you know, sort of supplementation before going down any more invasive things like, you know, Botox or that kind of thing. So before I ask you a few sort of closing questions, the last one I want to talk about, vitamin D. Now, we hear a lot about the importance of vitamin D, and why we need it and what it does. You guys wrote a fantastic blog for us. So for anyone that's watching, if you want to read an in-depth opinion piece about vitamin D, I really recommend you go to our website and have a read of it. But I wanted to sort of ask you a bit about the role of vitamin D, especially, you know, in this country, why we need it, what it does. And also there's been a lot of talk about whether it's got any protective capabilities over COVID. And I actually saw a piece literally about it this morning in the press. So yeah, talk to us about vitamin D.
Vitamin D, yeah, no problem. So we get vitamin D from two sources. One is from sunshine, but that is only between the months of May and September. So that's unprotected skin exposure, ideally sort of shoulders, upper arms in those months. And we need that exposure for around about, well, anywhere between 10 to 30 minutes. And then after that, we can go and get covered up and use our SPFs. Now, the thing with vitamin D and why it becomes more of a topic in winter is, one, because we're not getting it from the sun. We only get very, very small amounts from food. So really good sources are things like oily fish, salmon, for example, and mushrooms. And there's a small amount in some dairy and eggs. But it is, on the whole, dietary vitamin D is very low. Now, because it becomes so topical in winter months, this is because vitamin D plays a crucial role within the immune function. It plays a role in every single cell that is involved in immunity. So as the temperatures drop outside, our vitamin D naturally lowers because we've been maybe a few months without the sunshine. If our vitamin D levels within our immune system are lowered, then that may make us more susceptible to picking up infections. Okay, so in terms of vitamin D and COVID, this is a really interesting time. It's a very unique time for the healthcare professionals and for researchers. So for them to gather data and evidence on vitamin D and its role within COVID, is it protective, is it not, is it, you know, can it be almost a treatment as such? It's very, very difficult to gather that data. So far, there has only been what are called observational studies. And what happens there is the researchers will monitor COVID-19 patients, and they will take blood samples at different points within the infection to measure their vitamin D status and track, are those that have greater vitamin D status, you know, do they have a less severe infection when it comes to COVID-19 compared to those with a lowered vitamin D3 status? Do they have, you know, a greater severity of the infection? So what they're doing is very much observational. And from that, the only deductions that can be taken are whether there's a relationship. You cannot conclude causality. And that's where it's becoming really interesting, because there's 48 studies underway at the minute, and some of those I understand will be random control trials, which will give us a greater idea of the role of vitamin D within the COVID-19 infection. I mean, in terms of immune function, we know we need vitamin D in every single cell. So with that in mind, irrelevant of whether the person has COVID-19, flu, or the common cold, there's definitely, you know, in my opinion, there's definitely benefits of keeping on top of vitamin D intake. I mean, Public Health England recommend 400 international units daily. There are supplements that deliver larger amounts than that, say 1,000 or 2,000 international units daily. And that would really come down to a personal requirement. But I would say, I would stand in line with the Public Health England that the minimum is 400 international units on a daily basis, especially through winter.
Yeah. I mean, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I wish we had longer. I'm sure, like a lot of people watching, it's quite overwhelming. And my question to you, which I'm sure a lot of people will say, we're busy, we're all busy, you know, juggling, yes, midlife women, you know, many of us have kids and aging parents and jobs, and we just wonder if there is one multivitamin that could kind of tick everything you've said today. I mean, I know you mentioned magnesium, probably not, but if there was one multivitamin, or if you could pick out one supplement above any other that we should all be taking, what would you recommend?
Okay, so a multivitamin is really popular because people know that they get a full spectrum of all the essential vitamins, minerals and trace elements. So if you're looking at a multivitamin, I would say there's probably a few pointers. Make sure it provides a minimum of 400 international units of vitamin D. Make sure it has a good amount of iron, so a minimum of 10 milligrams of iron. Iodine is extremely important, so making sure that that has 150 micrograms of iodine, and that you have the full spectrum of B vitamins in there. And I would say, just sort of keeping it simple, they would be the main things that I would look for in a multi if I had female menopausal health in mind.
Mm-hmm. And should women be taking these supplements from a certain age, or would you just say as and when you start experiencing any sort of symptoms? I mean, I know we've said vitamin D we should just all be taking, but for everything else, is there an optimum age and length of taking them, or just as and when?
I completely agree with you in terms of vitamin D. I think that is definitely a standalone. And I think for individuals that are following vegan and vegetarian diets, they are probably going to have to supplement most of the time to ensure that they've got adequate amounts of those nutrients. For those that are not following, that are following an omnivorous diet, I would say optimize your diet like we discussed at the beginning of this interview, and then see how you're feeling. Do you have good energy? Do you sleep well? What are your stress levels like? Are you picking up infections frequently? And if your energy is low, you're sleeping badly, your stress is high, or you're getting frequent infections, they could be good indicators that maybe your nutrient intake isn't quite where it should be, and that would be the time to go and have a chat either at a health store or a reputable food supplement company and have a discussion as to where a bit of extra food supplement support could play a role.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how we choose the supplements. You know, there's so many brands available out there, and you know, how do you tell if a supplement's good quality? Like, what should we be looking out for? I know some of these supplements have fillers and various things in them, so yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly it. So when you pick up your food supplement jar, have a quick look through the ingredients list. And if at the end it does have things like titanium dioxide, that is a white dye, or magnesium stearate, that's a flow agent, or any bulking agents, they tend to be sort of gum type descriptions, then you know that food supplement there isn't 100% nutrition. It's a proportion nutrition and the rest non-nutritive compounds. So that's always a really important factor. And then, you know, how much of each of the nutrients is that food supplement providing? If it's only a fraction, is it really worth it? Because if it's only a fraction of what's needed, you could more than easily get that from food. So, you know, that food supplement has got to be making a difference, and there's got to be providing a good amount of the nutrients that's within it for it to be worth purchasing and using on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much, Jenny. Look, we've covered such a lot here, so and it's been really, really helpful. And I think for anyone who's watching, if you've got any other questions, I mean, do email me, casey@lattelounge.co. I can then forward them on to Jenny, and also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll get some answers for you. And check out Viridian's website. It's Viridian. Will you just tell us the web address? It's
yes, of course. Yeah. It's www.viridian-nutrition.com.
Lovely. And there's a great frequently asked section on there. And if you have a look at the philosophy page as well, they talk about the 3 pillars that Jenny was mentioned at the beginning: purity, ethics, and charity. And obviously, please, this doesn't replace, you know, if you're worried about your health, always doctor first. And check that there's no interactions. If you're on any other medication, you always, before you start any supplementation routine. So Jenny, thank you so much for joining us. We've recorded this for anyone who missed it, so we will save it and share it to our Facebook group after.
Fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.